having you in the heart of Kampala. We thank you for your time. We're always sitting with you in your sitting rooms, on your phones, wherever platform that you use to access this broadcast. We thank you for your time. As usual, we are always here to look at issues that affect the continent of Africa and affecting the people of Africa, those who are living within this continent, this beautiful continent of Africa, and those who, the Africans and the friends of Africa that are outside of this continent. We look at issues both current but also the historical perspective of the continent of Africa and its peoples. Today we shall also continue looking at there was a question that was posed by one of the viewers from Zambia, was asking about the issues that we discussed last time about the developments in the western part of this continent of Africa, the conflicts that are continuing in the western part, the Sahel region, and of course that part of Africa, and was looking at ECOWAS. Of course, we are talking about the exit, the threatening of exit of the three countries of West Africa that have recently had takeovers of government, and of course the relationship that's smoldering relationship with the ECOWAS leadership. So we'll be looking at that question, but also we have been informed that there will be a parliamentary committee sitting continuing this morning, because by yesterday, for those who are watching UBC again, you saw what was coming out of the trade and health committees. Today there will be that continuation of some of those discussions, and when that happens, when that feed is sent for us to us from Parliament of Uganda, we shall definitely give way, and we'll continue from where we'll have stopped next week, because as we said, Africa is here and we're also here with you. In the studio, as usual, I'm having my usual panelists, Ndugu Rugarama, and also my sister Rachel Takali, who will be talking to you. And like as always, we begin our discussion with what has transpired on this continent of Africa and the issues that really have caught attention of the people of Africa. Two things. Either maybe we can start off with this question so that we can exhaust it, or we can still start with what you people have captured and picked of interest to the people of Africa, in which case then I'll invite Rachel to begin with what you think was of importance to this continent of Africa, its people, its daughters, its sons, and its leadership. So we'll do that with Rachel. But I think Ndugu Rugarama, before we do that, there is also a number of developments that have happened on this continent, and definitely a lot has been said and more is yet to be said what is happening on this continent of Africa. But let's switch the mics. Rachel, karibu.
Thank you so much. I think for me, one of the things that have stood out this particular week was the visit of Baba Odinga, as well as
and his friend
Ndugu Ruto.
You guys.
Yes, to the presidential ranch in Chisoze, I believe. And it would really be interesting to have been a fly on that wall. Remember, these political opponents in many respects. But to see them there in an atmosphere that was away from the capital, it was in the countryside, and maybe that made for a more amiable sort of exchange. But it talked about the positioning of President Museveni on the continent, in my estimation. The fact that he can sit across from the sitting president of Kenya, and of course the leading political opponent, and to cause them to understand that the causes that they represent are bigger than themselves. I'm thinking that was his main thing. We also know that Odinga is working very hard to sit at the top of the AU arrangement, and that this was one of those arrangements where the path to such an aspiration is smoothened. But I think for me, along with many of the other things that are happening in Africa, it brought to the fore the place that moral authority plays in terms of the political atmosphere, in terms of setting the pace of what should be across this continent. I can't think in my mind what supersedes the picture. There was this front picture
Sure.
of on one side the president and on the other side. But more than that, because this very week the leading or the party in power here in Uganda, National Resistance Movement.
But even before you got that, it piques interest. Remember last time when we were here on Friday, we were talking something in passing about Baba Raila. And I think a few days earlier, before Friday last week, former president of Nigeria, President Obasanjo, was in Nairobi, and that's when he introduced the issue of having come to Nairobi and was proceeding to African Union Heads of Summit meeting, and he was telling the press that actually it's the one who introduced Raila and Baba Raila, that look, the African Union leadership is interested in this man, so we have come here to ask him to
offer himself.
Yes, for the leadership at the African Union, because the current leadership at the African Union is
expiring.
Yes, the term is ending. So we were like, oh, I would have expected someone from the government of Kenya to be around when this important announcement is made. Of course, Raila at that time looked like a young girl who is being pursued. He didn't even mention that he was very interested. He just looked shy, fine. But I think that was the start. Now, a few days later on, I see both of them now. I think after that announcement, the tempo, the political environment in Kenya completely changed.
I think also along those very lines, I'm thinking there was quite a bit of fancy footwork behind the scenes. Obasanjo has earned his place as one of the eminent elders on this continent in
Sure.
political terms. I'm thinking this is a good way to remove the tension from the political scene in Kenya.
Sure.
And I'm thinking it was a solution that is agreeable to all parties. I think if this,
it's a win-win.
If Baba has another preoccupation, I think it will help Kenya.
I have no idea keeping him around when he's not.
And President Ruto, I think, is glad.
Yes, also have time.
To have
But
this guy out of his
someone
way.
raised that question, I think one of them on the social medias, saying, I think he was a bit uncomfortable with that relationship, which for me, I find that one, I think it's a solution, part of the solution to the tensions in Kenya now, and of course many other countries.
And I think also, psychologically, I think it's a compensation.
Yes.
I think there's a realization that, I don't know if Baba Odinga thinks like this, that he'll probably never be president of Kenya. So
was never meant to be.
That is, it's high profile.
It's a good landing.
If you cannot be a president of Kenya, you can be the president of Africa.
Okay.
Yes.
So I'm thinking that is an agreeable answer.
Yeah, I think for me it is a comfortable landing for him, but also to allow now President Ruto to settle and work on the issues of the country without saying that, because the replacement, according to Bwana Raila, that will be Kalonzo, who will now be taking over the mantle of the opposition in Kenya, and of course Kalonzo is not known to be a very aggressive person. In fact, in most cases has been accused of being politically naive and weak from the time he was a vice president of the late president. But I think he's a more sober person. I'm not saying that Raila is not a sober person, but he's a more accommodative person who looks at things from both ends and not that aggressive in nature. And I think he'll also be a good alternative and to Bwana Raila. But also at the same time, do you guys see something different happening at the African Union with the, I'm sure the position of the African chair is going to be filled by Raila, by all consensus.
There is great consensus, if I may say, to the candidature of Raila continentally. And when Kenya politically catches fire, I can assure you it is not one of these small economies on the continent that
Sure.
the rest of the continent will not feel. Over the years, the rumblings, the political rumblings in Kenya have had a factor, constant factor, called Baba Raila Omolo Odinga.
Sure.
Now that there is a window for him to go to such a prestigious position as the chair of the AU Commission, then the following are very happy about such a proposition. One, we have got Dr. William Ruto, who must be smiling all the way and making all sorts of fervent prayers that actually the day Baba becomes the chairman comes sooner than later. And it is going to change the political landscape, the trajectory of politics in Kenya for some time, if not for forever.
Yeah, likely forever.
Why? Kalonzo Musyoka cannot be at the level, given the tribalization and colonialization of politics in Kenya, like Baba. The huge mass of the rule that have been behind Omolo Odinga will certainly not feel so comfortable being behind Kalonzo. That is as far as the candidature of Odinga to the AU is concerned. Probably what we should also note there is that it was like an unwritten rule that only members who are not giants on the African continent, I think that was changed for whatever reasons God knows when Dr. Dlamini Zuma became the AU chairperson. But it was an unwritten rule, and you can go back to history and look at the history of the AU and the chairpersons, that the seemingly small economies and not huge contributing members of the African Union only provide chairpersons. But for very strange reasons, we get one of the biggest contributing members, South Africa, contributing. I don't want to say that Kenya is one of the biggest contributing countries. Now, it producing or her producing a chairperson is also in order. Now,
sure.
very quickly, having noted that, of course, I don't want to take away the fact that seeing the way they do their politics is very interesting, by the way. And I think we have got a lot to learn from Kenya. They may have their own challenges here and there. It is work in progress. But seeing Raila Odinga Dr. William Ruto, the president, together coming to visit His Excellency Yoweri Kaguta Museveni for, and you know when our president wants to discuss issues that are usually out of camera, he does what he did. Who was the minute secretary there? Did you see any minute secretary there? That my brother, Dr. Omona, is taking minutes of what they were talking about. He did the same thing, if you remember, when there were some altercations here between the central government and Uganda Kingdom. And he said the Kawaka does not go around when he went to State House. And then he called, he went with some of his high esteemed people. He called him aside and wanted to show him the wreck from the State House. He said, "You come and, you know." They talked what they were talking from the window. And when they came back, he said, "It has been nice having you guys. It's very wonderful." And the meeting ended. But anyway, on that particular one, we must underscore the importance of, and I believe they are not going to stop here, but the importance of Museveni, the President of the Republic of Uganda, and within the East African bloc and on the African continent, that he can galvanize these political forces. You see? And he's still very clear-headed that he can offer guidance. And that one must, has been read through and through on a number of occasions. Maybe very quickly as I conclude on my observations. One, there is, it is now confirmed that my MP, and I say my MP because I'm from Ibrahim Semujo's constituency, has finally thrown in the towel, and he's just waiting for time to announce which party he is joining, whether he's coming as an independent or he's going back to Masaka to grow potatoes or join as another political party. At least he said that. So it is now.
Said July 25.
Something like that. That is one. Two, my other observation is I have seen your friend Maxal has finally agreed that he is going to abide by the Senegalese constitution. And
but he said he was exiting.
He's not saying anything. Because
he said April 2nd.
You see, what? Yeah, he said exactly. He said that finally he's going to.
That is not good enough.
No, because why that one is even more problematic, ladies and gentlemen,
yes,
is that he's saying he is going, when it comes to 2nd of April, yes, he will no longer be the president.
Yes.
But he's saying that the governing council will have to decide on the future of the country.
Now, you see,
now he is going to be there until the governing council takes a decision. And when the governing council sits and no, you extend for another year as we prepare for elections. So the people of
But that is not
Senegal,
what the court said.
What I want to note there, especially when you look at the constitutional provisions, of course there was a bit of tingling. But finally, what is happening is that there is a lot of engagements. And that must be, the credit must extend to ECOWAS.
ECOWAS, yes.
There is quite a lot of backdoor engagements, by the way. Like, of course, we're going into the topic. But I just wanted to say that.
No,
I just wanted to say that.
We'll pick it from there.
Yes, and maybe finally, or very finally for me, on this whole thing, is that I am observing increasing tensions within the Arab League, especially as a consequence of the continued bombardment and activities of Israel in the Gaza Strip. There are increasing tensions, and I think the voices that were hitherto not heard are coming out this time around. Some actually directly supporting the Houthi rebels.
A lot has happened, of course, on this continent, of course, and globally. I hear your friend Trump is continuing to win elections.
Primaries.
And in the
The
primaries.
primaries. That one he will beat our lady who is I love the guts of the lady who is
Madam Haley.
yes,
Nikki Haley.
up against him. But the question is, actually the race is between now Biden and Trump. And my fear is that the chances for Biden are very slim, although the stakes now in the United States of America, and especially with the Democrats, are that Biden should come back. But given the fact that there are some indicators, the Congress, for instance, not allowing the passing of the, allowing that America should extend the financial aid to Ukraine, when Ukraine and the upheavals within that country is their own creation, is another telling. And to the extent that the president of Ukraine reached the extent of saying that I will, if you want, I can bring Trump here to see the kind of suffering that is taking place, not just on TV, but on the battlefield, also tells a story that probably we may be underestimating Trump, but he still has a lot of clout in as far as the politics of the United States of America is concerned.
Yeah, because it happens. Of course, this is a guy who definitely had money and he had influence, and in all spheres, the guy who has had a case in almost every state of America, and either has been has been able to win it, or has the courts have ruled against him, but he still continues with his popularity. Maybe being a criminal in a country like that one also makes you somehow popular. It is possible, because like one said, it's a country of criminals. But when you come to think about some of the things now that are happening on the continent of West Africa, there was a person from Zambia who asked a question last time, which I wanted us to look at then before I think Parliament comes in. If we still have time, we'll continue with other developments within the great region of the West African part of this continent. Now, the guy is asking, I'll read it, and he is concerned, when we were talking last time, said, talking about the failures or the workings of ECOWAS. He said that where has ECOWAS failed in its mandate that has triggered plans for withdrawal by the three countries, talking about Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. And then he said, is ECOWAS's change of mind on the three out of fear or smart move? I think he's talking about ECOWAS finally saying, no, the sanctions that were imposed can be lifted, are now lifted, and we can now have, because that was also, I think, the push of the three countries said, if you want us to talk, then you first lift the sanctions, because we can't even fly out of here, we can't go anywhere. So I think that's what ECOWAS agreed, to lift the sanctions, then they can have a cordial engagement with the leaders of the three countries. Now, this person is asking, has ECOWAS failed in its mandate?
I think, first of all,
maybe we need to find out what is the mandate of ECOWAS.
Well, among other things, first of all, ECOWAS was primarily founded as an economic bloc, economic commission of West African states. But we also know that along the way, they assumed other roles, political and even military. It has about 7 core principles, but among them are those where we can weigh, given the claims of this particular group of nations. One of the things they say is that the arrangement, which is ECOWAS today, is not helping them to secure their sovereignty. One of the core reasons why ECOWAS, and by extension ECOMOG, came into existence was to make sure that the political arrangements as they stand today are not only tenable, but also enhanced by the cooperation that is a 15-member bloc. Now, some of the causes of this particular fracture in relations rotates around the fact that these group of nations, Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso, no longer feel that they are fully in charge of their affairs. They point the finger to their former colonial master, who is France, and they say that unrelenting interference in the economic affairs, military, even political matters, has rendered them all but sovereign. And they also say that, to their consternation, the ECOWAS formation is not helping matters. If I say, for example, that the jihadists or these Islamists are placing all kinds of pressure on our government, and all of those countries are disproportionately affected by terrorism, then we expect that this arrangement would rise to the occasion if you have intervened in other places where governments are under pressure, whether by military officers or other such pressures. How come you're not rallying to our side? And they also point to the fact that among the most important actors in pretending to stop this situation are France and its other allies. But in real terms, France has not made a difference in as far as repelling the advances of the Islamists. America is also there, but they're also not making significant headway.
Even Russia, no.
Germany is also there in the mix. So they are saying one of the reasons why we took the move that we took is because our civilian leaders had failed to appreciate the fact that something needs to be redone concerning how we've been protecting the nation. But they say these leaders were disconnected. They were not responsive to the cries of military leaders who are at the forefront of this effort, spilling their blood in the process. So if we are, one of the major reasons is to secure our sovereignty, why is it that ECOWAS, instead of joining this fight, because that is one of their major things, you are condemning us? These people felt and heard. We are still talking about the issue of have they failed. We are looking through the eyes of people who are putting these things on the table. They say, if one of the core reasons we came together was to improve our ability to resist the odds, whether those be security, economic, military, then we are not getting that. They're also saying one of the founding principles of ECOWAS had equality at its center. I don't think that these nations feel there is unequal treatment of the member states. It's also important. I'll give you quite an example. I was looking at some of the interventions by ECOMOG over the years to stabilize nations, whether that is in the case of electoral outcomes that resulted in crises in leadership, or whether that is in the case of military coups. ECOWAS, or ECOMOG, first intervened in such a situation in Liberia in 1990. But that arrangement was on until about 1996. But they did stabilize that situation for a while there. But I was also thinking that when Nigeria had a military coup in 93, where was ECOMOG? I don't know if I'm making sense. In other words, is it just like Nduguru Garama was saying before? Are these things for the smaller states? Do you intervene? Is it because Nigeria is massive? Is it because they form the bigger part of these military interventions? Because, of course, they're economically more powerful. But why is it that you rush to intervene in Sierra Leone and in Guinea and in Ivory Coast, but when it's in your house, the rules don't apply? What we are saying that over the years, and one of the things that I also pointed out the last time around, is that the crisis in terms of stagnation, economic growth, economic development in these countries, it's astonishing. But I think when they see that, for example, the helm is occupied by Nigeria, which has been moving over the years until they overtook South Africa, even Egypt, in economic terms. But I think they sit around and say, if we are supposed to have a common pool that somehow becomes something that we can enjoy collectively, how come others are moving and French West Africa in particular is not moving?
Yeah, but you see, also the other thing is that maybe, like you were saying, the bigger, the smaller. We have also seen most of these interventions and most of these blocks where the military components have been put together by countries, including NATO, including which other group, even the UN. You realize that there is a kind of sluggishness when it comes to certain countries.
The bigger countries.
Yes, so as compared, that also happens. But also the other thing that you raise is that I think the ECOWAS, from its formation, from the treaty, I think that was the Treaty of Lagos, was supposed to do certain things and not to do certain things. But over time, a lot has changed. But also it gives you a story about Africa when it comes to working together. In fact, my fear is that if nothing happens, now that we are going to have Baba as the chairman of the Commission of the African Union. By the way, who has been the chairman? This Arab Africa.
Dr. Mahat.
Yes. You realize that not many people know that we have been having that man.
But I don't think he has fared well, and his regime was not helped much when he allowed in Israel single-handedly to attain observer status at African Union. Against, of course, the decision should have been taken by the heads of states. It wasn't the case, and you saw the fracas when the session there was in when the commission was in session, and they noticed that the Israelis were there, save for Morocco, which had traded with Trump. Remember that. I recognize you, Trump, and America recognize the fact that my colonialism on the Republic of Sahrawi is legitimate. Forget about what African Union position is, and you, Morocco, in turn, recognize that the existence of Israel. It is only Morocco which is also on and off.
Exactly.
Which was not minding about the observer status of Israel.
Yeah,
but the rest of the members, they actually evicted them.
Yeah, but now my worry is that if nothing happens, even as Baba joins the African Union, we would see Africans leaving the African Union. And
because of that trend?
No, not that trend. Because there's the issues that are being raised by the three countries.
The trend set by the three countries.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Yes.
We are likely to see more people now thinking widely. We sat here at one time and we said, as Africans, can't we also cause, however bluff it is, a sanctions against some of these people we talk about, the colonialists, the French, the Americans.
As a body,
yes,
as African
yes.
Union.
And people, some of you are saying, but Do we have that capacity? But I think it is doable. Having seen now some of these people in the three countries, in Niger, in Mali, and Burkina Faso, saying, we are going to sanction France, and they have tried. And you know, when a madman says, I'm going to hit you, you better think twice, because he can definitely do it.
No, my take, Comrade Mtuta and our audience, is that first of all, we all acknowledged the fact that ECOWAS rushed
Sure.
to table all her cards. They actually applied what they had to apply piecemeal. They applied it wholesale, and at a go, they were left with nothing in their bag anymore. And when a child is insulated, what the Burkinabes, Mali and Niger had gotten exposed to had hardened them. Actually, by declaring that they were quitting ECOWAS, it was not because they had amassed enough power and they could see the alternative, but it was to send, it was their last also, out of frustration. They did it out of frustration that, okay, if you have forsaken us to the extent that, because in Niger, for instance, which was the worst hit, over 75% of the country was in darkness. They were going into a situation of being unable to pay salaries to the civil servants and the army. They had now tried to, I think with Mali, get the support, the Russian support of protection. Children at school, some schools had closed.
Actually, most of the schools had closed.
Had closed. You see where we are now. Hospitals, the intensive care units and what have you, had closed. In other words, the situation was so bad to the extent that now, in even lifting the embargo, but remember,
actually, even
the sanctions.
The Islamists, the fighting groups, were killing even more people, were attacking.
Because there was no ability. There was no ability
Exactly.
by the three countries which had been hit by the sanctions so hard to defend their people and defend the regimes themselves. The regimes themselves. The biggest problem here was that these three countries argued, and maybe to that extent one can feel the argument, that look, the forefathers, the architects of ECOWAS 49 years ago didn't have in mind that other member states could be so callous to the extent that you have got children, you sanction the countries, the sanctions go straight to the wananchi, children don't go to school, no trading, existing contracts between the member countries are frustrated, hospitals close, they die. The jihadists, as you are calling them, you know they are rebel activities, or these terrorist cells, which largely really have got a lot to do with some neighbors sponsoring here and there for their own selfish reasons also.
Exactly.
Became very active this time around because of lack of ability for the respective countries to defend themselves and also repulse these same rebels. So the situation in these three respective countries, which are actually landlocked, was so bad that these better countries had nothing to lose anymore. They decided to call it quits. Now, when the ECOWAS decided to lift the sanctions, of course they have said it is in the spirit of Lent. Now we are very religious. And also that we are nearing the month of Ramadan. And in that spirit, on humanitarian grounds, they are lifting economic sanctions, not political, that the political sanctions are still there, whereby trade will go on, the no-fly zone is lifted, the border being closed is also done away with, so that life can come back to normal.
Sure.
The challenge, though, is that it is like hoping against hope, because ECOWAS is also expecting certain things in return.
Of course.
For instance, Niger is meant to release the former president. At least that's what they expect. Because before this, there were backdoor negotiations. Then also, and this is my own analysis, given the fact that the three landlocked countries, whose economies are very bad, they are in bad shape, who had been hit badly by the enhanced sanctions from the member countries, now that they have lifted these sanctions to ease life, chances of them rescinding their quitting and coming back are high, because they are better off rejoining ECOWAS than getting out.
Exactly.
Then also, what I see probably, and this is where you had your comment, that are we not setting a precedent for some members even to run bad manners to get out of African Union? Morocco got out of African Union twice. African Union never wrote to them to come back. They came back. There is power in coming together. People may not see it, but it is there. There are so many advantages in coming together. And that's why I've said before that, yes, we may have issues with African Union. Certainly, they are there. But I can assure you, like, there are issues in the ECOWAS. Probably the founding fathers who envisaged that the ECOWAS, creation of ECOWAS, is going to bring economic dividends. But look, Niger is a poor country. Mali is a poor country. Even, by the way, Guinea is a poor country. Then now, apart from some of these progressive and big economies like Nigeria, member states, Senegal, then probably this Alassane Ouattara's Ivory Coast, which other countries within the ECOWAS broke really? That can we want to talk about? Have we therefore lived up to the expectations? Now, when these three rebel countries argue that the ECOWAS has not lived up to the expectations of the founding fathers, have they just realized that they have not lived up to the expectations when the ECOWAS as a bloc has put them under sanctions?
But at the same time, adding to that, I think these people are not also being genuine, the leaders
of the three countries.
Of the three countries.
I agree, they are not being
they are
sincere.
basing that on the argument that, look, we have had, for example, Burkina Faso has had the excuse me, the coups, and these coups, the coup leaders are the ones who have, to some extent, being accepted by ECOWAS. The people of Niger, you call them Niger when you are speaking French, they have also had a number of coups from the independence, and these leaders have also worked with the ECOWAS. The people of Mali, from the Mali Kingdom up to today, have had several. I think Mali has had about 5.
Cote d'Ivoire changed the constitution and around the third term. What did they do? What did ECOWAS do?
Yeah. So
in Togo, what did they do?
So they are saying, I think these people have been tampering around with the elections, with the constitution, with the takeovers, but they are part of you. Now, when you count a number of the members of ECOWAS themselves who are there, many of them actually have come on power through coups. So for you who is already also like us, and you are now sanctioning us for doing what you also did, does not make sense. To them, that was the argument. But also, at the same time, when you come to look at it, so their argument is that ECOWAS has failed to do away with the insurgency across the borders of the three countries. Of course, it goes down even to the north of Nigeria. But you don't expect that ECOWAS should have done that at a go, because these three countries, most of them, as they border themselves, Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, have had their issues a lot, both internally and externally. In Mali, for example, the Fulani have become an issue, and of course, this is the same problem that goes down to Nigeria. So the whole of this corridor and the increasing Islamization of the populations around this area and insurgents is not as a result of a single country or the weakness of ECOWAS, but also something that needs to be looked up from the time.
There is information there, Comrade Mututa. You see, some of these things, of course, this is a Pan-African debate, and we all know what it means when we are discussing Pan-Africanism. The member countries, especially these three that we are talking about, the failure to contain the rebel activities cannot be blamed.
I hesitate to call them rebels. This was
well, they cannot. The moment, of course, you are not in the mainstream governance, and you don't have the mandate of the people, and you are fighting either to negatively impact on the regime or even to overthrow it, then you are a rebel. But anyhow, jargons aside, when you fail as a country, and to a great extent, to contain your own problems, to be able to solve them, or at least to solve them to an extent, like it has been the case in DRC. We know that the failure of, for instance, DRC to resolve her own problems has been as a consequence of the external factors. Sure. We know that for a fact. But it also boils down to governance. You, as a huge mass of a country, numbering well over 100 people, being unable to provide leadership to sort out your own problems, we shall first of all talk to you. We speak to you as having failed before we externalize the problem.
Sure.
In the same breath, when you get the Sahel region and you look at those terrorist activities, now stretching to Nigeria also, the Boko Haram, all that stretch. But you can see the level of ability of Nigeria as a big economy with some semblance of democracy and leadership. They are containing the Boko Haram.
Sure.
But when you look at these other countries of ours, the Burkinabes, the Marians, the Nigers, there is a challenge of the internal leadership providing the ability for them to contain or even to flush out altogether the rebel or the terrorists.
You know, last time when they
but also, Ndugu Mututa, I think there is also something that's worth noting, that the ECOWAS arrangement has been challenged or under strain for many years now. These countries that are choosing to walk away, you have to understand that they haven't always been in this position of seeing ECOWAS this way. When ECOWAS or ECOMOG, the very first intervention in 1990 in Liberia at the time, among the contributing countries, there were 5. There was Ghana, there was Nigeria, there was Gambia,
yes,
there was Sierra Leone, and there was Mali. Among those countries, the three, aside from Ghana and Nigeria, have all had interventions of ECOMOG. Mali in 2013, there was Sierra Leone in 97, and there was Guinea in 98. But also in 2017, the last intervention of ECOMOG in Gambia. Among the troop contributing countries was Burkina Faso and Niger. So the question becomes, what has changed so radically in these intervening years, which is about 5 to 6 years, about 7 actually? What has happened to turn these countries that even sent men to their deaths to defend the ideals that are ECOWAS, to a point of saying, the heck with our history, the heck with our former cooperation. We don't care that we had anything going for the two groups of countries. It is better to start out in nothingness than to continue here. It's an extreme position. So the question becomes, what is the new extremity that has driven them to this point? I think really is the question of the hour. Because these dynamics have been there. The economic disparities, the power issues, the colonial overreach, and so on and so forth. But there has to have been something in these few years that has changed so radically, getting us to this point.
When we come back, we'll look at exactly what has happened to this extreme position of the three countries coming together and saying, no, enough is enough. But of course, you also, as we go for the break, you also look at what's the uniformity about these three people, the three leaders in the three countries. Maybe that will also inform us, and also the background to this, looking at how these particular countries were formed from the time they started as countries. When we'll come back, we'll look at those issues, and please don't go away. We are going off shortly for a short break, and after that, we shall be back. So stay with us.
Where does the
previously, in most of these areas that we had prioritized, farmers would produce, but you don't access market because the roads are not there. So you have the middlemen that would have access, and they persevere to go into those deep in the villages, and they buy with their own prices. They'll go there and set prices for you, and yet you're the ones who are producing this food. But now this time with the market linkages, people can now access market, because we have bridges that were, streams that were bottlenecks to access by the farmers. It has constructed bridges, so farmers can now reach market.
I've seen a number of community members out there that have formed themselves into groups and have identified enterprises, agricultural enterprises, rice and all that, and they've actually been successfully cultivating them. They've gone ahead, the project has gone ahead and also introduced small-scale industries like the rice huller, the grinding mills and all that that are managed by the groups. All these are successes.
gange ndetubona Kiranda Amina mu company eya WIB Uganda Limited ndi member. wemba memba kampani eno weyeida twalinga tutuli bulungi ng'abakyala ab'ewakawaka. Abakyala ab'ewakawaka twemerera ku baami baife nga bonkana abajjamu nanda nga twiddi nti abakyala tebakozesa ki nanda. UN Women weyeida yatuteekateeka yatwegesa okulunda engege ng'abakyala. Twatandika beeno okudulunda n'okudiriisa n'okolaki. Twafunamu ng'abakyala aba Bugiri district. Abakyala ba Bugiri district sofa tuli abakyala 14 abakola project eya WIB. Abakyala 14 twayawula mu sectors. Mulimu abakyala ba production abaliisa, mwaba abakyala ba validation abongera engege omutindo bayongerako omutindo, twaba n'abakyala ba harvesting abaharvestinga, twaba n'abakyala abakola aba marketing. Sector donna diri trained era didi kyedikola ki kyedikola. Project eno tufunyemu ng'abakyala. Government yaife ne ya Uganda njebaza okujja kujanga batulingirira mu ng'abakyala abana Uganda. Eri kujanga eturobingira ebibiina bingi. We have UWEB, baleta parish development model. We have Myoga. Byonna biri kwida muki mu bakyala oba mu bantu abaki aba Uganda.
Nyati Motion Pictures brings you the Tuko Pamoja Atekera segment. How did they become Karamojong, Itesots, and Lango?
We are actually the brothers of Israelites.
When Lango people reached Karamoja, the Karamojong remained there. The Itesots proceeded.
Those were the youth.
The Karamojong said, no, we are going to die there.
And the elders cast them, Ites. So that is how the name Ateso comes from.
Premiering in March on Sunday 10th, 2024 at the National Theatre from 3 p.m. to 8 p.m. To get a ticket, call 0778 787 660. Tuko Pamoja?
Previously, in most of these areas that we had prioritized, farmers would produce, but you don't access market because the roads are not there. So you have the middlemen that would have access and they persevere to go into those deep in the villages and they buy with their own prices. They will go there and set prices for you, and yet you are the ones who have produced this food. But now this time with the market linkages, people can now access market because we have bridges that were, streams that were bottlenecks to access by the farmers. It has constructed bridges, so farmers can now reach market.
I've seen a number of community members out there that have formed themselves into groups and have identified enterprises, agricultural enterprises, rice and all that, and they've actually been successfully cultivating them. They've gone ahead, the project has gone ahead and also introduced small-scale industries like the rice huller, the grinding mills and all that that are managed by the groups. All these are successes.
Welcome back to the Pan-African Friday program, which is coming to your way from the studios of UBC here in Kampala. By the time we left for the break, we were talking about what could have happened that the people the three countries in the West Africa, of course, that's where we're getting our discussion from, are now deciding to leave the ECOWAS. They have expressed their intent to leave the bloc of the West African community. And we are asking, by the time we left, was why now? And I was saying that maybe we need to look at the commonalities of the leadership in the three countries, that most of them, all of them actually, have come through coups, and they have come through the military takeovers. But also, when you look at these three countries, they are all French colonies, former colonies, now including their friend now Sali, who is also becoming a problem. Otherwise, if the coup succeeded, because it was also on the brink, I think it was the intervention of ECOWAS, Bakado, to have discussions with him, saying, please don't cause us more trouble because we already have enough on the plate. By now, we could have had the latest coup in that country. So but it seems that these people seem to agree, because again, they are all the former, what they call the French Sudan.
French Sudan?
Yes, the French Sudan. And they seem to have a lot of history of ethnicity with the groupings within this area. But also, they seem to have collaborations. And now that the guys in the army can sit together and talk. You remember that when the topple of Traoré happened, he actually had a few months back discussions and meetings with the people, the leadership in Mali. So it seems they were easy to link and agree to work together as the military components of that area. But also, I think ECOWAS, like Nduguru Garama put it, rushed with all the sanctions that ago, like they had done the most terrible thing that ever done in that part of the world. But also arguing, say, look, we're not the first people to do this. But at the same time, given the example now of Senegal, they are saying, where was this ECOWAS when people were tampering with the elections, when people were tampering with the constitutions? ECOWAS should have been able to stop that, like now they have done in Senegal, which is very positive. Maybe these are some of the issues that have informed this tripartite to come together and say, now, look, let's sit together and let's work together. To the extent, I'm told by last week they were talking of introducing a currency that will work in these three countries, which they have said, they have called the countries of the Sahel, something like that. So
Sahel Union, something.
Yeah, that they come together.
No, but I think my analysis really, first of all, on getting out. On getting out, or when you even listen to our colleagues, the analysts from the strategic, geostrategic colleges in Nigeria, in Ivory Coast, in the American think tanks, they all almost agree that the getting out of ECOWAS, of the three member countries of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, was largely out of frustration, to the extent that they had nothing to lose. Anymore, they had seen it all. And when they had that breather, the breathing space was provided by Morocco. Of course, Morocco, when they got access to the sea, the ocean, of course, Morocco was also fighting her own wars with Algeria, very well knowing that by creating that opening to the three landlocked countries, it will be getting to the nerves of Algeria. And I think Algeria, which has been, by the way, at the heart of a number of negotiations that we must not forget, for restoration of peace in the Sahel region over a number of years. They have not just started yesterday. And where it is claimed that probably they have got great interests in having peace in that region. Remember that Algeria is one of the leading countries that is providing the transatlantic pipeline, taking natural gas to Europe mainly.
Sure.
And when we look at the sanctions now being lifted off the three countries, you do not take it away from the interests of Europe and America. Why? Because of the raging war between Ukraine and Russia, and yet Europe is incapacitated in the sense that they have no alternative but to purchase the gas. They have to purchase that gas from Russia for their survival.
Sure.
Now, it becomes important if they have discovered the alternative of the natural gas coming from Africa and going through some of these countries as which are embargoed. It would make a lot of sense for Europe and America to persuade ECOWAS. These are strategic partners, to persuade ECOWAS to soften this time around. Remember that on the list of sanctions, the other members that were sanctioning the three countries, Europe and America, were part of them. Of course, we can now debate, if we wish to, the extent of the sanctions. But you know that African Union, Europe, America, and ECOWAS were the partners that were sanctioning the three countries. Now, when you look at the factor, the external factor, and you realize that because of that natural gas and the construction of the transatlantic pipeline, which will provide a permanent alternative if the war between Ukraine and Russia, or if Europe wants to turn Russia into a permanent enemy, is to be seriously considered, then they must fast track that transatlantic pipeline to carry the natural gas, to provide an alternative, a permanent alternative of natural gas to what was coming from Russia. To me, that too must be taken into consideration. Okay. But what is also critical is that we have also agreed here that there was too much rush. I don't know what was what our colleagues, the member countries under the chairmanship of Tinubu were thinking. I think it was one of the strategic errors for them to lay their cards on the table all at once and immediately. Nevertheless, that happened, but they have come back and corrected themselves. And it is even in Christianity, when you sin, you come back and repent of your sins. Now, they have diplomatically repented of their sins, and I hope that by lifting the embargo, these sanctions, which were hurting the common man, because if the enemy, for instance, if the person you wanted to target was the political figurehead, were the military people, then your sanctions were hurting the common man, a farmer, a trader, a school-going child, a university lecturer, which was not necessary. Now that they have come back and corrected that, I hope that the three countries are going to do a very quick rethink and also act accordingly to ensure that they get back to the fold and rejoin ECOWAS. But what is of critical importance also in that, I think, is what you mentioned, and I was, before we went for a break, telling you that Probably other members may get the temptation of, say, we can easily get out of any grouping. We have seen, of course, efforts. I call them efforts because it takes efforts anyway, even to do a wrong thing. You imagine why we had our East African community collapse in the 60s. It was because of the Big Brother, mainly. There were other factors, I haven't refused it. It was because of the Big Brother concept that Kenya thought it would, spread its wings over the rest of the members. Now, in the same way, when you get members exiting ECOWAS, remember, they are not the first. We had Mauritania, which about 20 years ago also got out of the what? And if you ask, why did Mauritania get out of the ECOWAS? Simple. You will find some of the reasons are not even persuasive. That, for instance, there were two. They thought there were two maybe Arab-oriented. That
they didn't look like other Africans.
They didn't fit. They didn't fit in the rest of the black communities. You know, we have
the African Union.
They are in the African Union.
The overwhelming majority of people in the EU, they look like them.
Interesting,
but finally they found where to belong.
Interesting,
of course, they couldn't have anywhere to go.
Let me tell you, Africa. You see, the problem we have, Morocco. This Morocco we have been talking about, just like Mauritania, you let people fry. You see, like there is a proverb that if the bird is yours, you let it fly. If it is truly yours, it will come back. When Morocco was told in a very candid manner that, look, the Republic of Sahrawi is an independent country, and what you are doing is direct colonialism. We are not going to agree as African Union. This is our position. They got out of African Union. They actually attempted on more than 2 occasions
to go to
European Union. Europe rejected them. They came back recently. But as you can see, the attempts, even including going against the position of African Union of recognizing Israel in its current state, you see, for them in its current state, and in turn having America recognize her colonialism over Republic of Sahrawi is also a problem.
Can we also talk? Can we also think? Also, of course, our thinking is maybe the attempt to withdraw from the ECOWAS was also another hurried decision by these people, if the war did. But also, is it possible that maybe the leaders, the new leaders, are not also looking at the consequences in the future?
They can't be thinking about the future because the arrangement, I think, in my view, one of the reasons why they brought these military takeovers was to preserve themselves. Sure. Because they were thinking these people are in cushy offices, in state capitals, in their flowing robes and air-conditioned cars, while we military men spill our blood.
Yeah,
so I think
very common. Yeah.
They really wanted to share the spoils of sacrificing ultimately. If I'm going to be the one who spills my blood, I might be I should be in control, in short. So it was never a long-term sort of outlook. It was self-preservation, I think, in the hope that maybe as military men at the helm, they can maybe do better in terms of resource allocation, maybe to the military effort. Exactly. Maybe they can do better in terms of mobilization of the masses because they understand these things better. I think there was also a realization that perhaps the civilian leadership has no understanding at all concerning what it takes to get on top of these rebel outfits. But also, it is not just these people who are thinking about self-preservation. So is ECOWAS. What informed the rash decisions in both directions was informed by the need You see, ECOWAS also has a reason, a justifiable reason for having wanted to stop this. You see, since 2020 to 23, when Niger overthrew Mr. Bazoum, Mohamed Bazoum, there had been 9 attempts to overthrow governments in West Africa, and 5 of them have been successful. So there was I think there was a panic of sorts. They thought that if something doesn't happen, there might be 10 takeovers in the next year if we wait at this very rate. But it's also, I think, in terms of self-preservation, they were also thinking about the implications in terms of whenever there is disturbance, wherever there is upheaval, one of the immediate repercussions are refugees. I'm thinking some of these states were concerned. If they don't enter this situation soon, there might be masses leaving these places, and so on and so forth. But also, to stop what can be thought of as a fragmentation. Because if you have an increasing number of nations who are led by the military, at this rate, in that region, or at least in ECOWAS, by the way, Chad, we don't often talk about Chad. They're also suspended for an irregular takeover of power.
Exactly.
There is Guinea, and then there's Mali, there's Burkina Faso. There are about 5. So if in a 15-member bloc, 5 members are already on a different course of governance, and with the potential to increase that number, you're in danger of falling apart. So I'm thinking they wanted to salvage what they had left, including influencing a walk back in terms of these military leaders understanding that you cannot work together except you agreed. If there are people who say they are basics concerning what should be, democratically speaking, and then you have other people who are at 0 concerning democratic governance, and those ones are getting new converts every other day, where does that leave the bloc? So I think even without the intervention of ECOWAS, there was a danger that this group may fall apart, left to its own devices.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Yes, the intervention also exacerbated some other things, but I think it's also a wake-up call. I know that these 3 countries contribute 10% of the GDP of ECOWAS. So when 10% is taken off, there is an impact. So even ECOWAS does not want them to leave. But because ECOWAS is desperate to stop these governance mishaps, and these nations are also desperate to get someone who understands why the situation is as is, I'm thinking this crisis will finally bring these parties to themselves. It is not in the interests of these countries to walk away. Their economies are too small, they are too dependent.
They are landlocked.
They are landlocked. It is not in their interests.
Already there have been 2 coup attempts in Burkina Faso.
True.
From the time they took over.
So which means
we'll even have more takeovers within.
Yes. So
and that begs the question, my sister Rachel. The initial takeovers, I want to believe, were against the French colonialism. What are these now new emerging takeovers fighting?
Within months. What do they
fighting
take
to
off?
get rid of. That's why we have to be very careful. I said this one here before. We have to be careful. If the original takeovers were against direct colonialism of the French, what are these new emerging takeovers, attempts about to get rid of?
But also, it is clear that the approach of ECOWAS or ECOMOG has left quite a bit to be desired. It seems that when you intervene in the wake of a coup, or when you intervene, as in the case of Senegal, when someone wishes to overtake an electoral process, it is not enough. day to day, there are other dynamics that lead to this. In other words, if someone is doing this because they feel that the route to their survival is endangered, where are these regional groupings when people are struggling against hunger, when people are struggling against inadequate health measures, when they are struggling against inadequate education provision? In other words, these our regional blocks are crisis-centered. That has to change. It should not come to a crisis before you throw your weight behind your neighbor. It should not be that a flood has to level a whole village before you bring your resources together to stem climatic issues. But why are we into knee-jerk reactions? Have we learned nothing? Why do we wait for things to go roughshod over citizens before we react?
But again, it's all those odds and that background. One may also wonder, where is the voice of African Union?
No, the African Union, of course, it takes us back to what we have been discussing. That our own beloved body, the former Organization of African Union, and now the African Union, has got challenges. And part of these challenges is ability to bite. But you see, what does it say when a member country has got unconstitutional takeover? Suspension. That's what it says. The African Union does not have a standing army, as of now at least, whereby they could act like ECOWAS was trying to act and say, we are giving you 1 week, we are declaring a no-fly zone. At the same time, we are saying all the borders are closed. We are also declaring a trade embargo. And the next, before you know it, we shall also be sending in the armed forces. Now, the African Union not having a standing army has been a very big cry for a number of years. And I think the heads of states are looking at that, and with time, that is a matter that is also going to be sorted out, because it will help a great deal in putting together some of these challenges. But what clearly, if you want the question to be answered, what the African Union has done so far, your countries, yours faithfully, Burkinabe, Mali, Guinea, Niger, are all suspended by the African Union.
That's my problem.
And maybe the suspension, that's what it says. Of course, you can now argue that what is the effectiveness of the suspension?
Exactly.
Now, the effectiveness, you see, somebody may not tell you. You may act bravado.
No, Nduguru Garam. You have a son. This son has not, you are not looking after him, you are not feeding him. But he works in your house and works out to go and steal people's food. And then you say, today I've chased you from this compound.
It should be the other way around. Member countries are supposed to feed African Union. It is not the African Union to feed the member countries. The responsibility of African Union is to create a supervisory role to adhere to certain principles.
Agreed. But then this relationship has to be symbiotic.
That is not a problem. To me, what the problem is, member countries, after getting indisciplined, to think that you are now going to see the wrong in your parent and begin excuses of the African Union is a barking dog. It is not even a dog, it is just old, toothless and useless. Somebody some time back was making an argument, and you see, sometimes maybe we abuse this media. He said, these members who congregate at African Union are just tea takers. They go there to take tea. I disagree. I do reckon the fact that African Union has got challenges, and every institution, including the United United Nations, including the Security Council, including the European Union. In fact, the European Union, this pretender, Britain, which claimed that they had reached the highest level of democracy, they just shamelessly walked out. They shamelessly walked out after how many years? This is a body which is well over 70 years of the European Union. But they walked out. And I want to tell you, they are now craving to come back. Because there is power in unity. In the same way, therefore, although we are saying ECOWAS has got challenges, although we are saying that African Union has got challenges, Morocco, by walking out, she came back by her own. In the same way, Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso are going to come back. Yes, you can argue that, no, but they have been persuaded. Yes, you see, it does not mean that when you get your child in a wrong and you discipline to kill. No, this is not what it is. You discipline, and actually the prisons now have got a better term, that they are no longer prisons, they are recorrection centers, that they correct the wrongs, the recorrection centers, something like that. In the same way, ECOWAS had to impose some of these sanctions, mainly to correct the wrongs, to have these member states to recognize the fact that what they were doing was wrong. And I want to bet, by the way, because of some of these measures, yours faithfully, Senegal, they are not going to go the trend that these other three countries took. They have actually what was about to happen, and you said it here, that anytime, if it was not for the interventions that ECOWAS has made, there were going to be a coup.
Yeah, sure.
But the coup is not going to take place in Senegal, simply because of the efforts of ECOWAS. Therefore, regional groupings, and specifically talking about ECOWAS, are extremely very important. And that does not mean that they do not falter.
Rachel, is this going to take us a long way in putting Africa together?
What a question. I think Africa's coming together, or realization of its grand ideals, cannot be rushed by anybody. These dynamics have to work themselves out, however untidy, however ugly and unseemly. They have to reach the end of their logical cycles.
But the problem has been the time, because remember when they were starting the Organization of African Unity, Nyerere puts the same case, said we cannot go together at a go. Let's go in piecemeal, block by block by block, so that finally we shall get up there. 60 years later on,
of that.
60 years later on, we're still talking of the same thing.
That is really what we are saying. I think there is a degree of prudence in that approach. Because even if these localized, whether you're talking about West Africa or East Africa or Southern Africa or even Central, if among them, these fairly smaller blocks than, of course, the African superstate, cannot see eye to eye, imagine pulling them together in such a situation. East Africa, by the number of countries that bring us together, the East African community, is smaller than ECOWAS.
Sure.
ECOWAS has 15 states.
Yeah.
But look at the East African community patchwork. Some have 7 years for presidency. Others have 5. Others have not had
Parliamentary
elections.
democracy.
They give up on, they will not have an election in the foreseeable future. Others, Somalia, I don't know what arrangement that one is. Those ones don't even have these regular elections. It is, I think, clan leaders that now decide on who the president is, something like that.
Somalia is parliamentary democracy. That's how the arrangement is.
Okay. But parliamentary democracy.
But the clan is, yeah, decide.
But still, the clans, some might even call it a tribal-based arrangement. But what we're saying is, these regional blocs are yet to sort themselves out, is really what I'm trying to say.
Sure.
And ECOWAS, in all honesty and in all truthfulness, is light years ahead of realizing their journey. In other words, for them, they have agreed and they're actually putting these things into practice. The fact that what affects your neighbor affects me also. The execution may not be perfect, but they are further down the road than the East African Bloc, for example. They are further down the road than the Central African Formation. We don't hear much about it, but it's there. Even if it's the Maghreb Union, these ones have things that they are willing to do to make sure that the arrangement works.
Yeah, sure.
Including the ultimate price. So while they're staggering at this time, they have more to show in terms of really doing what it takes to make this arrangement work, including stepping back from the brink of war with the partner state. Some of us, some of these regional blocs, are in the fixes they're in because of impossibly huge egos, which egos will not see a modification maybe in our lifetime. People have closed borders for egotistical reasons. At least West Africa, the ECOWAS formation, they closed borders out of a unified position. That is more than is happening where we are right now. There are two countries in this area who have recently closed borders without asking the East African community. Sure. One of them is Rwanda, the other is Burundi. But then we also have another partner state that has recently marched out a force that was supposed to stabilize their internal situation and invited another bloc to enter their space. But what we are saying is that these regional formations, considering the general dynamics on the continent, are really all that we can handle.
For now?
Yes.
Okay. Ndugu Rugaramu, do you see us progressing so fast on the African continent in terms of the unification of Africa under one leadership?
I do not claim to be a Jewish prophet like my senior comrade Professor Piero Lumumba says, but we are on the right track, although the odds against us increase every other day. The African Union, member states and the natives of Africa, including the diaspora, the black community, if you like, is increasingly realizing that we are the endangered species, wherever we happen. We are endangered people here on the African continent. We are the endangered people even when we are outside of Africa. That being the case, it may not happen in my lifetime or lifetime for that matter, but going forward, I think we are going to put our act together. It will just be one day like this, when the tables are going to turn and the black person is going to be in the rightful position, and that rightful position, like the archaeology puts it, that it is the first creation is the black man, which means that even the Bible must also recognize the fact that also the black person is the first man. It means that the first God's creation is black, and therefore we must be first in everything that is supposed to be done under the planet Earth and elsewhere. Having said that, the African Union has been undergoing a lot of mutation and also self-discovery. We have been realizing our mistakes. We know, for instance, that one of our biggest mistakes is that we are unable to fund our programs. Vision 2063 cannot easily be realized when we do not have our own money. But you see the interests of other neo-colonialists who time and again want to come and be part of us. We have had other forces, we have had other people come on the African continent or where the African communities are, and they become Africans. But we have not had Africans, for instance, go to Europe and you become a European. That is hard. Why is it so? It tells you, therefore, that we must now realize the fact that we must do what is ours. Our own problems, we can call for support to work with us to solve our own problems. But we cannot surrender our own challenges in the hands of probably the very perpetuators of the problems and think that we are going to get the solutions.
Yeah, but of course that's what you are doing. Apparently, I think the leadership of Africa has that problem, that the African leaders are behaving like night dancers. They
have realized that. Like, for instance, the ARM, the African Development Bank, we know that there is Japan, there is Europe, some countries from Europe, German, and also Asian countries, which are major contributors. Forget about Nigeria and South Africa, which contribute to the African Development Bank. But they are now stepping up the campaign to make sure that we generate our own revenue. We emphasize where we have got the highest cooperative advantage in agriculture, because it is postulated, for instance, that a continent that is going to be a leading continent in agriculture by 2040, 45 will be the richest continent, globally speaking. So we are realizing some of these challenges. We didn't have a unit called Food and Nutrition at African Union. It has been established. We realize that we are suffering under the burden of disease, malnutrition, and at the same time, we don't have food security. So that component has also been established. You can see that the African Union we were talking about some 20 years ago is not the very African Union we are talking about. We have also employed at African Union the consultancy firm, about 3 consultancy firms. It is unfortunate that I think 2 of them are not so African, but there was a lot of outcry. Now they have readjusted, and I think the 3 consultancy firms, the 2 of them are majorly and essentially African. 1 is not, but at least it will be working with the 2 which are African in nature to reorganize the African Union. So your fears, Comrade Mututa and probably our viewers, that African Union has been a barking dog and it cannot bite, and although we know the reasons as to why the Organization of African Unity was established, largely all the objectives were achieved at that time. Then the reshaping of Organization of African Unity, now to African Union, which is ideological reorientation, which is being worked on now with the establishment of the consultancy firms to reorganize the African Union. I have hope, and with the creation of some of these units, like I have told you, Food and Nutrition, Peace and Security, ECOSOC, they are all being worked on. I have hope, and with the, of course, increasing minds like yourself, we are here, we are talking about some of these problems. And people confuse, they make mistakes. They think that we talk a lot and we don't do much. But let me tell you, a problem talked about is half solved. And that is why I believe that if you don't talk about a problem, it probably, if not in all situations, means you don't even understand the problem.
Now, back as we wind up on the issue of the ECOWAS, do we, because what is happening in ECOWAS is, we seem to agree, it's a replica of, is the actual working of the way things are done on this continent. It's not anything that is very different from what is happening in the SADC. It's what is happening in the Maghreb, I'm sure, although those ones don't consider themselves as Africans.
Until it's convenient.
I know. When they have issues, they're Africans. When they are at peace, they are not part of, they can even ask, you go there and want to ask, how is Africa? Because they don't seem like
probably information here. A country like Algeria, by the way, it is in the Maghreb region. But I want to give you information that it has been, historically speaking, one of the leading countries in the Pan-African ranks. Save for Egypt. Save for Morocco. It's only in Morocco when we were in Casablanca. The market women were asking us, how is Africa?
But South Africans used to say that also.
Yeah, but even South Africa,
South Africans used to say that. How is Africa?
Thank you very much. But for them, they would say it. You see, the levels of, the words which I can't use on the national broadcaster. But you see, when you don't, when you don't understand something, and for deliberately, you don't want to understand it, I can assure you the South Africans who were asking that, they very well knew that they were actually Africans. At least they were on the African continent. Okay, let's take it that way. But they deliberately, they wanted to show it to you that they are above you. Now, it's different. In the markets, in the equivalent of a window market in Casablanca city, these women seriously believed they were not on the African continent.
Anyway.
Yeah, that
but
happens.
also, continue. And Ndugu Mututa, I think one of the things you're talking about, what kind of tomorrow we can expect. I've been heartened by this engagement of Baba Odinga and Dr. Ruto. But before that, a number of weeks back, Uhuru Kenyatta, he came here. We've heard lately that Olusegun Obasanjo has been doing the rounds, promoting the candidature of Odinga.
The
I
agent.
think one of the most underutilized ways forward has been the use of eminent persons. They have marginally been used mostly in peace efforts, conflict resolutions. But there is a whole lot of things they can do, because once they are not incapacitated, as in bedridden or whatever, there are many, there's a lot of support they can lend.
Yeah, you can see what Obasanjo is now doing.
Definitely so. And the weight of some of these individuals will cause even the most intransigent belligerents to step back from the brink of disastrous exertions. Actually, in the cases of when ECOWAS was threatening war against these three nations around the clock, there were eminent persons, clergymen, Muslim clergymen from northern Nigeria, I believe, who leaned very heavily against the Nigerian establishment, not to inflict any more sorrow. Because you know those countries are largely Muslim.
Yeah, sure.
So they came at it from a point of feeling for their brothers in the faith. And I think the role of such people should be elevated. Because we know politicians by their nature are very much about self-preservation. But when you reach a place of an elderly, eminent person, in most cases, they have the requisite resource base. They're no longer looking for money.
For money, yeah.
In many cases, they have the requisite exposure. They're no longer looking for prominence and all those self-actualization pursuits.
Yeah, that's one of the characteristics when one was analyzing, saying Raila has all those attributes.
True. Now, I hope he can use them for good. He was not using them for good before. But
for him, it was about the presidency and nothing else.
Yes. He was still stuck in this groove. We were looking at him as a man who had actualized himself, but he had never seen himself as such. Actualization for the man meant sitting in the highest seat. Now they're saying there's another seat. But what I'm trying to say is that where governments are not able, as in intergovernmental situations, I'm hoping that the African body politic will engage people of stature to make a difference.
Yeah, and I think that has been one of the biggest problems when it comes to the African Union. Of course, when you compare it to the European Union, that most of the people who are sitting at the helm, or those who are taking decisions at the African Union, are generally the leaders, the heads of state.
Who are consumed with self-preservation.
Exactly. Now, when it comes to certain decisions being taken at that level, may directly or indirectly impact on what is happening at home. We are seeing a rare scenario where an opposition leader is being appointed from a government, from a country, to lead the African Union.
That he opposes passionately.
Exactly. It may, and if it were maybe a decision that was solely to be based on President Ruto, maybe the decision could have been different.
True.
But we need now another, what you are suggesting, and which I also believe, that we need another force outside of the bracket of the African leaders who are the sitting presidents.
They're not political actors?
Yes. People who can be outside of this divide, of this bracket, but can take decisions that can impact positively on the content of
Interestingly, I just want to make a Ndogu with the ICK intelligence. Just want to make a very quick, 2-3 quick comments. One is that let's credit Dr. William Ruto. There was, when the seconding country, the very mother country, does not second, it becomes a very big challenge. If Kenya, for instance,
it does, because you remember even Ethiopia refused this man at the health.
Thank you very much.
But they said no, he will be here.
So it becomes a very big.
Because now that becomes a problem for him back at home.
Yes, I want to credit Dr.
And he can't return there this time.
Dr. William Ruto for that. As you can see, he's also accompanying. Although, of course, I know that it helps him, but at the same time, that show of political maturity is very important. Ndugu, I want also quickly to observe the following. One, we lost Engineer Bossa, the Ndega head clan. There is this gentleman, the one who actually did the arresting to make sure and also preserve that man. That border boy. That border boy, you see what our president in Tanzania did when we had that terrible accident of the plane, and he brought that man who was in a boat and rescued. I think our government should also look at that border man and see what to do with him. Now, finally, very finally, I also want to look at the issue of who is this, but it can pass.
Anyway, our time is also up. Yeah. Thank you so much, the viewer who has been with us for all this time from whichever platform that you are been following us. We thank you for that time. We had said that there will be Parliament coming in, but I think they will be coming in later after we leave. But we thank all our viewers, the production team that have been with us, my co-panelists who have been on this program for this show. Until next week on Friday, when we shall come again and discuss more issues of African nature, and we always share information that you send to us. Of course, unfortunately today we didn't give you the number, but I shall be giving you the number in the subsequent programs where you can send us the information on WhatsApp, and then we shall be able to share. We thank you so much, and thank you panelists, thank you everyone for this program. Until Friday, we say is when we shall meet again. Have a blessed weekend.